Welcome back. We are going to end up with this episode of asking about imaginary situations. Remember that the previous class we talked about wishes and imaginary situations. Now we are going to talk about asking for these imaginary situations. And remember, we are going to use the way of the if clauses for referring to hypothetical situations. The hypothetical situations are, as you remember, unreal situations. If there were more police officers on the streets, there would be less criminal situations, but there aren't. So we have some more criminal situations. If you didn't have to go to work early today, you wouldn't have to get up earlier than usual. But you have to go to work, so you have to get up earlier, probably at 5 in the morning or something. If I left university, I wouldn't have a chance to have a fine job. That means that my condition is that if I left, I don't plan to. That is something that is not real, at least not in the close future. So I wouldn't have the chance. But as I continue in the university, I will have the chance. So you have to remember, in this case, we have to use this with a sentence in the simple past. So how do we make these questions? The questions, of course, have to start with the result. The result, remember, that is used with could or would. So that's what we are going to ask about. You have the question, what would you buy first if you were a millionaire? So the resulting clause is what is going to produce the question, because I know the condition. If you were a millionaire, what would you buy first? I would buy a house for my family. That's a good and real situation. Where would you travel if you have a private jet at your service? So you don't have a private jet at your service, but let's see, if you had one, where would you travel? And I say, I would travel all over the world. Remember, the result is the one that is going to be figured out in a question. The question is going to help us to know what could be the probability for these sentences, because I already know the clause. Now, let's analyze this. If you want to start with if clause, you have the possibility to make the question later or in the second part of the sentence. You have one example there. If you lived in a different country, what profession would you decide to have? Of course, you are not going to use a comma because you're using what. So if you lived in a different country, what profession would you decide to have? I'd be a psychologist so I could learn people's ways. If you were young again, who would you choose as your best friend? So if you were young again, what it means that you are not young again? You know the if clause. So who would you choose as your best friend? Remember, in this case, we are using the would as a part of the question. I guess I wouldn't take another decision on who my best friend would be. So it doesn't matter what you have in the condition, the result is going to have either the affirmative or the negative sentence as a result for a probability. What happens if I have simple questions? Remember that the simple questions are the ones that are yes or no questions. So in this case, you say, would you buy a new cell phone if I asked you for it? Suppose that I'm talking to my father and I am asking him, would you buy a new cell phone if I asked you for it? I'm not going to ask you, but would you? No, I wouldn't. I'd have to think it over. So I would have to rethink it and think it over and over if I decided to buy a new cell phone. Now you have the other way around. You can start with a clause. If Carolina proposed you matrimony right now, comma. In that case, I want to stop for a little in this place. If you start with a condition, you have to separate the question with a comma. In the case of the simple questions. So if Carolina proposed you matrimony right now, would you accept? Yes, I would, but you wouldn't tell me that now. So that's a hypothetical situation, and the question is hypothetical too. So when you want to use responses, the responses are going to be far away probabilities. So that's why you use would. And in the case of the responses, you can use would with a contraction. It means I'd, he'd, she'd, you'd, or you can use wouldn't if this is a negative. I wouldn't, you wouldn't, she wouldn't. And remember, after would or wouldn't, the verb is in the simple form. So we have to remember that these questions are the ones that we use in order to know what might be, what would probably be the result of the clause. Thank you very much.